On Wednesday, the 24th of April, President Joe Biden stroked the last nail on the coffin for that is TikTok, sending shockwaves across the globe. With a stroke of his pen, a bill was signed that pushes TikTok, the beloved app of millions, to the brink of extinction in the United States. Every TikTok influencer's nightmare just got closer to reality. What happens next? Will this be another Donald Trump-style back down, or are we looking at something different? We decide not to make a video about this until we have done our research to explore where this is heading, what are the timelines, and whether or not, and when the numerous TikTok influencers should begin to hedge their exposure. Please share this video with every TikTok fan or influencer you know, because we are about to break down what happens next and the timelines in which that will happen. To understand why things look very dire and different now, we have to go back a little bit. It all started back in 2020 under the Trump administration. August 6th, a presidential executive order targets TikTok, citing grave national security concerns due to its Chinese ownership. Remember this part because we will come back to it again, especially the fact that it was a presidential executive order. ByteDance took the government to court, and in September 27, 2020, ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, breathes a temporary sigh of relief as a U.S. federal judge blocks the attempt to ban the app from app stores. The battle seemed to ebb, but the tides were far from turning. Come November 12, 2020, another slice of the executive order is set to stop the TikTok's operations. Yet again, legal defenses stall the ban, marking a year of seesaw legal battles. With the past laid bare, let's look at the present crisis. Now, we have a current legislation that has passed through the House largely unopposed, the Senate unopposed, and signed by President in record time, effectively set of a ticking time bomb in the heart of TikTok's operation in the untied states. Under the new law, ByteDance has until January 19, 2025, to find a buyer for TikTok. Miss this deadline, and it's a full shutdown in the U.S. This is no longer an executive order but a law, and that has huge implications which we will be looking at shortly. Failing to meet this deadline means TikTok would be removed from app stores and severed from U.S. internet hosting services. This isn't just about stopping new downloads. It cripples existing app functionality, essentially erasing TikTok's digital footprint stateside. TikTok is swinging back with a legal challenge, claiming this move infringes on First Amendment rights. Their argument? This ban amounts potential state-sponsored censorship of millions who use the platform for expression. Well, that is rich if you ask me, but I digress because that is not why I'm making this video. This video is more about looking at the implications going forward. TikTok CEO, Shou Chew, has vowed to fight the legislation tooth and nail to ensure it was prevented. Legal experts believe the argument hinges on whether TikTok's operational ban constitutes an overreach of governmental power or a necessary step for national security. It has to be said that this is definitely go to the courts, and the government will not be short of TikTok ex-employees who will back whatever claims they are going to make, and on the hand, it will really be hard to make a case on the fact that the U.S. government is trying to muzzle a group of teenagers on a social media app that shows random videos mixed with politically charged ones here and there. So to the court we are going, and it is fair to say that the agreements are actually pretty crystallized by now on both sides. However, it is the outcome that man on the street, and to be precise extent the creator ecosystem on TikTok, is more interested in, and we will break it down here. As we head to court, there are only two possible outcomes obviously. TikTok wins the case and the status quo remains. What will be the timeline for this? Unlike the last time when it was a few months, we don't see it happening that way on this occasion. This is why Donald Trump was erratic and had a scattergun approach to everything including this, and therefore he used a presidential order and didn't really care one way or another if it worked. In this case, it is a law, and therefore I expect this case to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Because it is a matter of national security as the government stated, then it might take some time before this case makes its way to the Supreme Court. We will look at a timeline shortly. Now back to the outcomes I mentioned earlier. I stated that one outcome was a TikTok wins. I will put the probability of this happening at 20% and the probability of the U.S. government winning at 80%, and this why. Let's unpack it. Firstly, the government's prerogative to safeguard national security is deeply rooted in legal precedent. Under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, the president has broad powers to regulate international commerce after declaring a national emergency that threatens the U.S. In the case of TikTok, the argument hinges on the potential for foreign espionage and data manipulation, given that ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, is based in China, a nation-state actor the U.S. considers a formidable geopolitical adversary. Now, it is fair to say that there are parts of this that look political, but you can be rest assured that the courts will not be entertaining that argument one way or the other. Let's be clear, it is impossible for the U.S. government not to have secured an array of witnesses, ex-employees of TikTok and intelligence operatives who will be willing to corroborate any assertion they make. I would be very surprised if there is not a large dossier somewhere, made up or real, that the government will use to defend their case. Legally speaking, the courts have traditionally shown deference to the executive branch in matters of national security, especially when foreign policy is involved. This judicial deference is grounded in the political question doctrine, which discourages courts from second-guessing executive decisions linked to foreign affairs. Furthermore, the government might also leverage Section 721 of the Defense Production Act, known as the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, which reviews transactions that could result in control of a U.S. business by a foreign entity, to argue that allowing TikTok to operate under Chinese ownership poses an unacceptable risk. Make no mistake about this, TikTok's defense will be robust and likely built around these points, emphasizing user rights and the global nature of digital platforms. However, given the broad scope of national security and the existing legal frameworks that empower the executive to act decisively, the scales looks very likely to tip in favor of the government. History shows us that when national security is on the line, the courts often side with the government. Whether it's the suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War or the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, precedent supports a broad governmental authority in times of perceived national threat. Take, for instance, during the Civil War, in 1861, President Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, a fundamental legal safeguard that protects individuals from arbitrary detention. This suspension, initially unauthorized by Congress, was later ratified, highlighting the extraordinary measures taken during dire national threats. Moving forward to World War II, another stark example emerges with the internment of Japanese Americans. In 1942, shortly after the Pearl Harbor attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which led to the forcible relocation and internment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans, justified by fears of espionage and sabotage. These actions were challenged in the landmark 1944 Supreme Court case, Korematsu v. United States. The court, in a controversial decision, upheld the internment as a valid exercise of wartime authority, emphasizing the precedence of national security over individual rights during significant national crises. These cases illustrate a clear pattern. When national security is declared at risk, the courts have historically granted wide latitude to the government's actions, even when these infringe upon constitutional rights. This precedence sets a formidable foundation for the government's argument against TikTok, as they can cite a sustained history of judicial deference to national security concerns. Given this historical backdrop, the challenge for TikTok is not just about proving the lack of a national security threat, but also overcoming a deep-rooted judicial philosophy that has consistently prioritized national security during times of perceived national threat. Now that it is clear that the government will win this almost certainly, what should a TikTok influencer/business do? Is it panic time? Will you lose your business in January 2025? The answer is a short yes, a long yes, but this is how it will play out in terms of the timeline and how you can begin hedge or diversify your business in preparation for the inevitable. When TikTok files its lawsuit, the first battleground is the district court. Here, initial hearings and filings will take place, focusing on the immediate legal arguments from both TikTok and the government. Typically, cases in district court can take anywhere from a few months to over a year, depending on the complexity of the case and the court schedule. Given the high-profile nature of this case, we can expect an expedited process, but even then, we're looking at about 6 to 8 months before a decision is reached. Regardless of the outcome, the next stop is almost certainly the U.S. Court of Appeals. The losing party is likely to appeal the district court's decision, seeking a reversal or a modification. Appeals can be lengthy, often taking another 6 to 18 months. This stage involves more detailed legal scrutiny and a panel of judges to review the district court's interpretation of the law. And finally, this legal drama could very well reach the Supreme Court. But not every case makes it here. The Supreme Court selects cases that have national significance, legal ambiguity, or require resolution of conflicting decisions by lower courts. I am not sure this will get there. Should the Supreme Court decide to hear TikTok's case, the timeline extends further. From the filing of the petition to a decision being rendered, the process can take an additional 6–12 months. This includes preparing briefs, scheduling oral arguments, and the justices deliberating on their decision. What this means is that TikTok's legal battle could easily span 2 to 3 years. At the end of this, TikTok, and by extension ByteDance, will back to where they started, and then the question will be, will they sell or leave or sell without the algorithm? One option that can be ruled out completely is selling as is, and this is why. To understand why ByteDance cannot sell TikTok as is, we need to look at China's strict regulations on technology exports. It's not just a business transaction, it's a matter of national policy. In August 2020, China updated its export control laws, specifically including a key category that impacts TikTok directly, the algorithm. This algorithm, which powers TikTok's addictive content recommendation system, is now classified under personalized information push service technology based on data analysis. According to this law, technologies like TikTok's algorithm cannot be exported without explicit approval from Chinese authorities. This is laid out in the Catalog of Technologies Prohibited or Restricted from Export, which aims to protect China's national security and technological advancements. ByteDance can't just pack up TikTok's core technology and sell it to a foreign company. They must first obtain a license from the Chinese government, which involves a review process that assesses the potential impact on national security and China's technological landscape. What makes this even more challenging is the geopolitical tension between the U.S. and China. With the U.S. pushing for the sale of TikTok due to its own national security concerns, China's regulations act as a formidable barrier, effectively giving the Chinese government a veto over any potential deal. So that is basically a no from the CCP. Next is selling it without the algorithm. Now that is a non-starter for various reasons. The algorithm is what makes TikTok, TikTok. Without it, you're essentially buying a shell of an app. The algorithm's ability to analyze data and predict what users want to see next is what keeps engagement metrics sky high and ad revenues flowing. Imagine buying a Ferrari without the engine. Sure, it looks great, but can it perform? That's the dilemma facing potential buyers. Without the algorithm, TikTok loses its competitive edge, the very essence of what makes it a powerhouse in the social media landscape. Furthermore, TikTok's user base is built on the expectation of a seamless, highly personalized experience. Stripping away the algorithm would lead to user dissatisfaction and a significant drop in active users, which in turn devalues the entire platform. So really we arrive at the only option on the table: leave the US and potential the EU and the UK to follow. So really now is the time to begin to diversify. You have 2 to 3 years to build an audience on other platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and locals to prepare for what is to come. I hope this has been a helpful explanation. Please drop me a comment if you agree or disagree. Stay tuned. Like and subscribe for updates on multiple stories coming in the next few days. We cover what matters to you. This has in 5 minutes, the extended edition, signing off until next time, when we bring you another explosive story. Bye for now.